The courtroom went dead silent when Marcus Thompson pulled out his lunch. Not because he was eating during his hearing, but because of what was in that brown paper bag, a single granola bar and a juice box meant for his 6-year-old daughter. I've been on this bench for 37 years, and I thought I'd seen everything. But what this single father was about to reveal made me question whether justice and the law are always the same thing. Marcus stood before me that Tuesday morning in April, citation in hand for $5,000. $5,000 for what the city called repeated violations of street vendor regulations. He was 32 years old, wearing a shirt with a small tear near the collar that had been carefully stitched back together. His shoes were worn but polished. Everything about him screamed exhaustion and dignity, fighting for the same space. The prosecutor laid out the case. Marcus had been cited 17 times over 6 months for operating a hot dog cart without proper permits in various locations around the city. Each violation carried a $300 fine. He'd paid none of them. Now they'd compounded into this $5,000 judgment, and the city wanted its money. I looked at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, you understand these charges? Yes, Your Honor. And you've been operating without the proper permits? Yes, Your Honor. No excuses, no deflection, just simple acknowledgement that caught my attention immediately, because people don't usually walk into my courtroom and admit guilt that quickly. They fight, they explain, they justify, but Marcus just stood there accepting responsibility for something I didn't fully understand yet. Mr. Thompson, these permits aren't expensive. A street vendor license in this city costs $250 annually. Why not just get the permit? He shifted his weight. I tried, Your Honor, 3 times. The prosecutor jumped in. Your Honor, the defendant's applications were denied due to zoning restrictions. He kept applying for locations that aren't zoned for street vendors. I held up my hand. Something wasn't adding up. Mr. Thompson, if you knew the locations weren't approved, why did you keep setting up there? Because those are the only places I can be during those hours, Your Honor. Now, we were getting somewhere. Explain that to me. Marcus took a breath. Your Honor, I work 3 jobs. I'm a night security guard at Memorial Hospital from 11 o'clock p.m. to 7 o'clock a.m. Then I drive for a ride-share company from 7:30 to 2 in the afternoon. The hot dog cart, that's from 2:30 to 6 revolutions per minute. And those locations the city says I can't use. They're the only spots between my second job and where I need to pick up my kids from school at 6:15. 3 jobs. The words hung in the air like an accusation against all of us sitting comfortably in that courtroom. You have children? 3, Your Honor. Maya's 8, Jacob's 6, and Daniel just turned 4. And their mother, Marcus' jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She passed away 2 years ago. Cancer. The courtroom had that particular kind of silence that happens when everyone suddenly feels smaller than they did a moment before. I've learned to recognize it. It's the sound of assumptions crumbling. I looked at the citation again. 17 violations over 6 months. I did the math quickly. That's roughly 1 violation every 10 days. Mr. Thompson, if you're getting cited this frequently, why not just stop? Why keep putting yourself in this position? Because I need that third income, Your Honor. Without it, I can't make rent. The prosecutor cleared his throat. Your Honor, while we sympathize with the defendant's situation, the law is clear. These regulations exist for public safety and fair commerce. We can't make exceptions based on personal circumstances, or everyone would claim hardship. He wasn't wrong legally. That's what made this so difficult. But I didn't get to this bench by only caring about what's legal. I got here by caring about what's right. And sometimes those 2 things stand on opposite sides of the courtroom, staring at each other. Mr. Thompson, walk me through your day. Start from when you wake up. He looked confused. Your Honor, humor me. What time do you wake up? I get about 3 hours of sleep after my security shift ends. So I wake up around a.m. and then I get the kids ready for school. Maya is old enough to help with the younger ones, but I still need to make breakfast, pack lunches, make sure homework is done. I drop them at school by 11:45, then start my ride-share shift. When do you eat lunch, Mr. Thompson? The question seemed to surprise him. It surprised the prosecutor too, but I had a reason for asking. I always have a reason. I don't usually, Your Honor. I keep some snacks in the car. Show me what you brought today. Marcus hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out that brown paper bag. He opened it slowly, almost embarrassed. 1 granola bar, 1 juice box with cartoon characters on it. That's your lunch. It was supposed to be Maya's snack for after school. I forgot to grab something else this morning. I stared at that juice box for a long moment. This man worked 3 jobs, slept 3 hours a night, and was about to eat his daughter's afternoon snack because he'd been too busy taking care of everyone else to take care of himself. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Even he could see where this was heading. But what nobody in that courtroom knew yet was what I'd noticed in Marcus' file, a detail so small that everyone else had missed it, and that detail was about to change everything. I leaned forward and Picked up the citation record again. Mr. Thompson, I noticed something interesting about these 17 violations. Every single one was issued between 2:15 and 3:45 p.m. Why is that? Marcus blinked. He clearly hadn't expected anyone to notice that pattern. That's when I pick up my kids from school, Your Honor. You're supposed to finish your rideshare shift at 3 o'clock, correct? Yes, ma'am, but you keep working past that time. He nodded slowly. The afternoon is when surge pricing hits. Between 2 and 4, I can make almost double what I make in the morning. That extra money, it's the difference between making rent and not making rent. I set the papers down carefully. So let me understand this. You're violating these commercial driver regulations during the exact window when you need to pick up your children, because you're trying to squeeze in a few more high-paying rides before your shift ends. Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor jumped in. Your Honor, this actually makes the violations worse. The defendant is knowingly breaking the law for financial gain. I held up one finger, just one. It's a gesture I've perfected over 43 years. That means be quiet and let me think. Everyone in my courtroom knows what it means. Mr. Thompson, where do your children wait when you're late picking them up? The school has an after-hour program. It costs $15 per child per hour. I did the math instantly. 3 kids, $45 per hour. If Marcus was consistently 45 minutes late, that's another $30 to $45 he couldn't afford to spend. But he was spending it anyway because those extra ride-share fares during surge pricing brought in more than the after-hour cost. This man had turned his life into a complex mathematical equation where every variable was measured in dollars and minutes, and one wrong calculation meant his family didn't eat. How much do you owe in fines currently? $6,800, Your Honor. The number landed in the courtroom like a grenade. $6,800 for a man who was eating his daughter's juice box for lunch. And if you can't pay, my ride-share account gets suspended. I lose that income entirely, which means you can't make rent, which means I lose my apartment, Your Honor, which means my kids go into the system because I'm technically homeless. There it was, the real stakes. This wasn't about traffic violations or commercial driver regulations. This was about whether 3 children would have a father or a foster home. I sat back in my chair. Mr. Hernandez, I addressed the prosecutor. You're right that the law is clear. These regulations exist for good reasons. But I want you to think about something. If we suspend Mr. Thompson's ability to work, what happens to those 3 children? The prosecutor's face showed he'd already thought about it. Your Honor, I understand the difficult position, but we can't selectively enforce laws based on sympathy. I'm not talking about sympathy, counselor. I'm talking about consequences. The city will spend approximately $6,000 per month per child in foster care. That's $18,000 monthly for 3 kids over a year. That's $216,000 in taxpayer money, and that's assuming they all stay together, which statistically they won't. So add trauma and therapy additional. Caseworkers, court costs for custody hearings. We're looking at $84 million minimum. I let those numbers hang there. Now Mr. Thompson owes $6,800 in fines. Even if he could pay it, which he can't, that money goes to the city. But if we suspend his license, the city immediately starts hemorrhaging money in foster care costs. So from a purely fiscal perspective, which outcome makes more sense? The prosecutor opened his mouth, then closed. He was smart enough to see the trap I'd laid. There was no good answer that didn't make the city look either cruel or stupid. But I wasn't done. Mr. Thompson, I've read your entire file, not just the citations, everything. You were a loan officer before your wife died, made $78,000 a year. After she passed, you took 3 months off to grieve and take care of your kids. When you went back, your position had been filled. You've been working these 3 jobs for 18 months, trying to get back to stable ground. Marcus' eyes filled with tears. Nobody had bothered to look at the whole story. They just saw a guy breaking rules. Your Honor, he said quietly, I know I broke the law. I'm not asking for special treatment. I just need a chance to make this right without destroying my kids' lives. That's when I made a decision that would end up on the local news, get me both praised and criticized, and fundamentally change how I thought about justice. Here's what's going to happen. I'm consolidating all 17 citations into one case. The total fine is $6,800. You're going to pay it. Marcus's face fell. He started to speak, but I held up my hand. You're going to pay it by working 200 hours of community service at $25 per hour. That's $5,000. The remaining $18,800 will be paid in monthly installments of $50 for 3 years. No interest. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, the law doesn't allow for community service in commercial driving cases. The law allows me discretion in sentencing, counselor. I'm exercising it. I turned back to Marcus. Your community service will be completed on weekends. You'll help renovate the community center in your neighborhood. They need the work. You need the hours. Your children can come with you. There's a kids program that runs simultaneously. What I did. Next is something I'd been thinking about for the past 10 minutes, watching this man try to hold himself together. Furthermore, your license suspension is stayed pending completion of community service. You can continue driving commercially, but you'll report to this court monthly. Miss one payment, miss one community service session. Get one more citation, and the full suspension goes into effect immediately. Do you understand? Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I won't let you down. Don't thank me yet. You've got 200 hours of hard work ahead of you, and Mr. Thompson, your kids are watching how you handle this. Show them that when life knocks you down, you get back up and do the work. I will, Your Honor. After Marcus left, the prosecutor approached my bench. Your Honor, with respect, you've just created a precedent that every traffic defendant in this city will try to exploit. No, counselor. I created a solution that serves justice better than blindly following procedure. There's a difference. I leaned forward. Tell me something. If we suspend that man's license, who benefits? Not the city, not the children, not society. The only thing that happens is we feel like we enforced a rule. That's not justice. That's bureaucracy masquerading as principle. The prosecutor wasn't happy, but he left without further argument. What he didn't know was that I'd already made 3 calls during the lunch recess. The first was to the director of the community center. I'd allocated funds from the courthouse discretionary budget to provide lunch for Marcus and his kids. Every Saturday they came to work. The second call was to a colleague who ran a job placement program, Marcus. Loan officer experience was valuable, and I knew 2 banks looking for qualified candidates. The third call was to my own insurance agent. I wanted to understand the exact implications of Marcus' situation, and what I learned made me even more certain I'd made the right choice. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was reviewing cases when my clerk handed me a letter. The return address was Marcus Thompson's. Inside was a handwritten note on notebook paper. Your Honor, I wanted you to know that I got a job interview at First National Bank. They're looking for a loan officer. The interview is next Tuesday. My kids helped me pick out a tie from the thrift store. Whatever happens, I wanted to thank you for giving me a chance to stay in their lives while I fix my mistakes. We completed our first weekend of community service. The center director said Emma asked if she could help paint the children's room. She told him, my dad says when someone gives you a chance, you give back twice as much. I'm teaching them that because you taught me respectfully, Marcus Thompson. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it in my desk drawer where I keep the reminders of why this job matters. Marcus got the job at First National Bank, started at $52,000 a year, which wasn't what he made before, but it was enough. He consolidated down to 1 job. Began sleeping more than 4 hours a night. His kids stopped showing up to school exhausted. But here's what made the story remarkable. 6 months after his sentencing, Marcus came back to my courtroom, not because he was in trouble, because he'd completed all 200 hours of community service early, and he wanted to start making his monthly payments ahead of schedule. Mr. Thompson, I said, surprised to see him. You're not due back here for another 3 months. I know, Your Honor, but I wanted to pay 3 months in advance, and I wanted to tell you something. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was Emma, his daughter, standing in front of the newly renovated community center children's room. The walls were painted bright yellow. There were new shelves filled with books, a reading corner with cushions. That room, Emma and I designed it together. The center director said, it's the most popular space in the building now. Kids come after school every day to read and do homework. Marcus's voice got thick with emotion. Your Honor, you could have taken my license. You would have been justified. Instead, you gave me a chance to show my kids that mistakes don't define you. How you handle them does. He paused. Emma told me yesterday she wants to be a judge when she grows up. She said, judges help people fix their lives instead of just punishing them. That moment right there. That's why I've stayed on this bench for 4 decades. Not for the salary, not for the authority, for the opportunity to see someone transform their situation when given proper support instead of pure punishment. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next showed me that one good decision creates ripples you can't predict. The community center director called me 2 months later. He said that after Marcus completed his service, 7 other people from the neighborhood volunteered to help with renovations. They'd heard about the program and wanted to contribute. The center had a waiting list of volunteers now, people who wanted to give back to their community but didn't know how. The director asked if I could create a formal program where people with traffic violations could choose community service. He had projects lined up for the next year. I called a meeting with the city prosecutor, the public defender's office, and community leaders. We designed what became the Restorative Justice Traffic Program, Defendants with Clean Records who faced license suspension due to unpaid fines could apply for community service options. Not everyone qualified. Repeat offenders, DUI cases, reckless driving didn't apply. But people like Marcus, people who made mistakes while struggling through impossible situations, they got a path forward. The program launched 4 months after Marcus' case. In the first year, 63 people participated. The city saved an estimated $1.2 million in foster care and social services costs. The community center completed full renovations. 3 local parks got new playground equipment. And here's the number that mattered most to me. 61 of those 63 people kept their licenses. 61 families stayed together. 61 people kept their jobs, their homes, their stability, too. Didn't make it. 1 violated probation. Another stopped showing up halfway through. But 61 out of 63, that's a success rate no traditional punishment model ever achieves. Marcus Thompson became something unexpected. He became a mentor. When new participants entered the program, the community center director would introduce them to Marcus. He'd tell his story, show them what's possible. When you commit to the work, I watched this man transform from someone who couldn't see past his next shift to someone helping others navigate the same struggles he'd faced. That's redemption. Not the absence of consequences, but the transformation that happens when consequences are paired with opportunity. Now, I need to address something viewers always ask when I share stories like this. Judge, aren't you just letting people off easy? What about accountability? Let me be clear. Marcus didn't avoid accountability. He worked 200 hours. He paid every cent he owed. He completed parenting classes and financial counseling. He did more work than if I just suspended his license and moved on. The difference, his accountability built something instead of destroying something. That's not soft, that's strategic. Traditional punishment would have cost Marcus his job. He'd lose his apartment. His kids enter foster care. The state pays $45,000 per year per child for foster care. That's $90,000 for Emma and James, plus legal fees for custody proceedings. Plus, Marcus likely ends up homeless, possibly incarcerated for other violations that stem from desperation. Total cost to taxpayers for the traditional approach, conservatively $500,000 over 5 years. Cost of the restorative approach, administrative oversight, and the community center projects that benefited everyone. Anyway, which one sounds tougher now? Here's what I've learned in 43 years on this bench. Punishment without purpose doesn't rehabilitate anyone. It satisfies our desire for retribution, but it doesn't solve problems. It creates new ones. Real justice asks a different question. Not how do we make this person suffer for what they did, but how do we address the harm and prevent it from happening again? Sometimes that requires incarceration. Dangerous people need to be separated from society. But Marcus Thompson wasn't dangerous. He was desperate. And there's a massive difference between those two things. 3 years after his case, Marcus got promoted to shift supervisor at his warehouse. The pay increase meant he could finally move his family to a better neighborhood, better schools for Emma and James, safer streets. He called me when it happened, not because he had to, but because he wanted to share the news. Your Honor, I got the promotion, and I wanted you to know that none of this would have been possible if you'd taken my license that day. I told him the same thing I'm telling you now. I didn't do anything special. I just listened. I looked at the full picture instead of just the violation, and I chose a path that served everyone's interests, including society's. That's not radical. That's practical. The Restorative Justice Traffic Program is still running. It's expanded to 3 other counties. Other judges have adopted similar approaches, and the data consistently shows the same pattern when you give people structure, support, and accountability that builds instead of destroys. They rise to meet it. Not everyone. Some people aren't ready. Some people won't do the work, but most will. Most people, when given a genuine opportunity to fix their situation, will take it. That's the bet I make every time I sentence someone like Marcus, and more often than not. That bet pays off. Emma Thompson is 14 now. She's an 8th grade honor roll student, captain of her school's debate team. She still wants to be a judge. Her father tells me she practices by holding mock trials with her younger brother, who apparently plays a very dramatic defendant. James is 11, excelling in school, talking about becoming an engineer. Both kids know their father's story. He didn't hide it from them. He explained that he made mistakes, faced consequences, and chose to become better. That's the lesson they're carrying forward. Not that their father got away with something, but that he took responsibility and transformed his life. Last month, Marcus brought his family to the community center for the 5th anniversary celebration of the renovations. The director invited me to speak. When I arrived, I saw something that made every difficult decision worth it. The children's reading room that Emma helped design. It's named the Thompson Family Learning Center. There's a plaque on the wall explaining that it was created through community service by someone who wanted to give back. Marcus didn't ask for that recognition. The center director did it because Marcus' work inspired the entire volunteer program that followed. Standing in that room, watching kids sprawled across Cushions, reading books. I thought about where Emma and James might have been if I'd made a different choice 3 years earlier, separated from their father, bouncing between foster homes, dealing with trauma that takes decades to process. Instead, they were there with their dad, laughing, proud of what he'd built. That's what justice looks like when it's working correctly. Not vengeance, not punishment for punishment's sake, but accountability that creates positive change instead of generational trauma. Marcus Thompson walked into my courtroom expecting the worst and hoping for mercy. What he got was neither. He got justice, real justice, the kind that acknowledges harm, demands accountability, and creates pathways for people to become who they're capable of being. And that yellow room full of kids reading books. That's what happens when we choose to build instead of just destroy. 63. Families stayed together because we asked a different question. Not how do we punish this, but how do we fix this? That shift in thinking, that willingness to see the full picture instead of just the violation, that's what separates justice from bureaucracy. Marcus Thompson didn't need a lecture. He needed a chance. And when given that chance, he didn't just take it. He multiplied it for everyone.